Hello everyone, I'm the introverted astrologer and today I'm back with a video that I'd promised you. But firstly, a big thank you to those of you who so warmly welcomed me back with my last video. I really appreciated your kindness, thank you. I can't tell you how excited I am about today's video because British politics is erupting with fresh change and sudden surprises. Back in July, an MP by the name of Zarah Sultana resigned her Labour membership and she announced that she would be aligning with Jeremy Corbyn. This was news to him, but nonetheless, by late July, a website was launched to sign up and support the party under its provisional name of Your Party. Now, the figures of people joining up and pledging their support was phenomenal because within the first hour, more than 80,000 people had joined. That was 300,000 by the next day. And since then, the latest estimate places it above 700,000. To place these figures into context, let's have a look at the membership of some of the other parties. The Conservative Party, for instance, has dwindled massively over the years and is now an estimated 123,000 members. Labour too has seen falling numbers. The latest figures in February suggest 309,000 people. Those numbers are far lower than the numbers we had last year before they were elected. Moreover, Labour have stopped releasing figures regarding membership following a decision made by their executive committee. So we have no way of establishing how many more people exited Labour following its attempt to impose some swinging disability cuts a few months ago. I believe this measure has lost them a lot of support. How about Nigel Farage and the Reform Party? This is a party which will be a force to be reckoned with. Their membership is currently 234,000 and it's not falling. I'll hone in on them again in my next video. There is a saying, cometh the hour, cometh the man. And I've been looking at the chart of an emerging politician who is very tuned in to the zeitgeist. Let's go and have a look. Can you imagine the alarm that must be rippling through the Conservative and the Labour Party right now? They are dwindling in comparison to Reform anyway. There's no reason to assume that Corbyn and Sultana won't register this party. They are under some compelling transits and progressions at the moment. Corbyn also has a few powerful years ahead and we'll look at that too. But for now we have Corbyn's chart here with the putative birth time of 8 p.m. Corbyn had allegedly stated in a text to another affiliate that he was born late in the day at an inconvenient time, and so an astrologer has rectified this to 8 in the evening, and this is the chart which is registered on the Astrodienst server. Now surprisingly, Corbyn has no cardinal placements with his personal or social planets. The only planet in a cardinal sign is Neptune. So this wouldn't necessarily be the chart that you'd associate with a strong leader. Bear in mind that Boris Johnson too has a similar shortage of cardinal energy, although in his case he does have a cardinal ascendant and midheaven. We can see the emphasis on communication with all these Gemini placements, and so we know that this is somebody who is able to think, dissect, analyse very easily, somebody who needs mental stimulation and exchange with the people around him. There's also that potential for substantial goodwill to others because of Jupiter's sign placement. We might anticipate progressive, humanitarian, reformative goals. Now, a Jupiter trine might look marvellous on the surface of things, but we have to remember that trines can also bring such strong feelings of ease and optimism that we don't shift to put this energy into action. And so this square between the Sun and Saturn could be a blessing in disguise. It sets up that inner conflict and frustration, the potential drive to overcome personal difficulties and challenges and press on. I think we could say that Corbyn has had more than his fair share of personal doubts, of feelings of inadequacy, defensiveness, perhaps some fears of rejection. And I say this because not only do we have the Sun square to Saturn, we also have Saturn in the Sun's own sign, Leo. We might find a certain angst around desire to be in the spotlight, to shine, because Leo is the sign of the entertainer and the showman, and yet there are these inadequacies too. We can see that it potentially squares the ascendant too, just reinforcing his very hard-working nature and the fact that the road to progress will not always be clear. It will take immense stamina and resilience to pursue. The Moon and Mars are together in the sign of Taurus, and we know that the Moon is extremely happy here, being in its exaltation, and yet Mars is not so happy. The fact that the two combine quite closely is interesting, because I'm going to show you this in a couple of other places today as well. Here in Jeremy's chart, we could consider that strong, passionate bent to Moon and Mars. Taurus is bringing in that practicality and loyalty and gives a earthy, steadying influence. And so I suspect Jeremy will not be so quick to rise to anger, but he can. And when he does, it will be a deep, stubborn anger, an unrelenting force, particularly when you consider too that Pluto is entering the equation. Pluto-Mars, with its sharp, laser-like focus, is speaking of that huge power, that resilience, possibly struggles along the way, which we have seen with Corbyn's political career. He has persevered through challenges with authority, conflicts with party leaders, confrontations, and he has displayed grit and quite extraordinary tenacity by bouncing back and going it on his own, despite now being in his 70s. If we have a quick look at Zarah Sultana's chart, we don't have an exact birth time, and so I've set up her noon chart here. We'll have to disregard the house positions though, and bear in mind, of course, that moon could be anywhere between around 12 odd degrees of Taurus through to perhaps 26 degrees. I was quite stupefied when I looked at this chart because the amount of fixed and cardinal placements is quite staggering. There is absolutely no major placement in the mutable signs. Chiron is in Virgo and that's mutable, but we don't usually include Chiron when we're assessing somebody's overall signature. And so Sultana is overall that strong fixed water signature of Scorpio. There is the potential that she too has this Moon-Mars energy. I'm so glad I don't have to argue with Sultana because the passion and determination in her chart is incredible. We do have a couple of very interesting things that I'd like to hone in on. Now, one of them is the asteroid Pallas Athena, which Nigel Farage has quite tightly configured in his chart too. Now, this is an asteroid which is very much about intelligent and strategic battles. Pallas has great wisdom and intelligence and stands up for her beliefs. She is the goddess of war, but this war is very calculating and strategic. This is not a drunken brawl, and we wouldn't usually be too swayed by her conjunction with a social planet like Saturn. However, there is that extremely tight connection too with Mars and Pluto, and so she has the Pluto-Mars energy that we saw in Corbyn's chart in a much more intense pattern. This is somebody who is very feisty, very determined, immensely determined. I couldn't understate that. She might also leave some debris and destruction in her wake. Such is the force with which she will pursue the things that are important to her. There is another very powerful signature in this chart too, and this is the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. Many people born in the 1990s had this conjunction, but in her case, they are just 4 minutes short of being a perfect conjunction, and so this is going to figure very prominently in her life. We can also see it pulling in that Venus, and it will almost certainly trine with her moon. I was riveted by this because, of course, we are seeing the beginnings this year of a minor grand trine forming in the heavens, one that pulls in Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. This is part of a pattern that has led astrologers to predict that 2025 and even more so 2026 will include major strides forward for humanity. And if we look closer at what Uranus-Neptune symbolises, Neptune is unbounded, it's compassionate, it could be escapist, and it represents dreams and visions. Uranus, on the other hand, can be sudden change. It can be revolutionary, innovative. It shakes up the status quo and asks that we be true to ourselves. And there is also, of course, that lightning speed. So when we have these two come together, we have somebody who is capable of very sudden insight. They are potentially visionary. There is a huge capacity to be creative with these visions. Their instincts can be quick, sudden, inspirational. I believe we're seeing a strong shift in what the collective desires, and that personalities like Zarah are able to pick up on the needs of the collective. Now, because both Corbyn and Sultana have that strong natal intermeshing of Mars and Pluto and Moon, and they also have a Taurus moon in common too, and I wondered whether this would result in some common sympathy between them. This composite made me chuckle because harmony is not the first word that springs to mind. I'll just remind you that this composite chart is based on the midpoints between their respective planets, and so the moon will be 3 or 4 degrees either way, but it will still be pulled into this fixed cross that we can see going on here. Now, we don't get perfect people and we don't get perfect composites. There's no question that there is a basic affection there between these two. They feel at ease and optimistic together. There is this ongoing affection for each other, a happiness that their paths have crossed. However, the potential for disagreements between these two is immense. We don't have to attend every argument that we're invited to. They really will have to take considerable care not to allow disagreements between each other to escalate out of proportion. Some friction in relationships is good, because if you had a perfect relationship, you'd probably leave it. There wouldn't be that excitement and creative conflict to make the friendship or alliance interesting. And so good things can come of this too, because after all, this is a political alliance, and one in which considerable policy and strategy will need thrashing out. The fact that both people can engage vigorously in this is a good thing in one way, but it could get out of hand unless they both behave with maturity. Now, Sultana is still a relatively young MP. She's in her early 30s still, whereas Corbyn, on the other hand, is of course in his 70s and has had a great deal of experience in his life. Now, because this is a political alliance and the two are apparently going to be co-founders of this party, Neptune is not really very well placed here. And Neptune is on Saturn, so things often won't be clear. There may well be confusions and misunderstandings here, even with the best will in the world and utmost moral integrity. It will just simply be a part of this relationship. If these two see the new party grow, potentially there could be new influx from existing MPs in other parties who decide to stand down. And I think it would be wise if Corbyn and Sultana shared the responsibilities within this party with other members too, because there are difficulties in here, ones that could damage the relationship over the longer term. You can see in the synastry interchanges quite how much of this fiery moon Mars we have. Corbyn's chart is in the centre and Sultana's planets are placed around the outer edge. Of course, her moon is falling somewhere in the area of Corbyn's moon Mars, but her own Mercury Mars is opposing this interconnection too. This needn't be life or death in what is, after all, a political, professional relationship. But it is going to take great maturity and care to handle these energies, and I'm hoping that Corbyn, with all his experience, will keep a handle on this. Of the two of them, he is going to be the more adaptable, the more verbally fluent and skilled communicator. It is also very likely that he has come to incorporate considerable sensitivity into his communications with people around him. And so let's just hope that he is able to contain these more difficult energies. Now, the next general election must be held by August of 2029. But of course, it could be held sooner than that. So we'll look at the next few years and we can see that Corbyn has two pretty major transits going on right now. One of them involves transiting Pluto on his Jupiter. This is something that has been in orb since 2024, and it is essentially a transit with the power to bring success. There could be changes and deepening in our belief systems, and we will have the drive to push for better, to improve ourselves, to aim for success. And of course, Uranus has been travelling through the final degrees of Taurus and has now just entered Gemini. This means it will have formed a square aspect to Corbyn's natal Saturn. Where Saturn in our charts is describing something about where we are fearful. We may have settled into certain ways of living and being that are comfortable for us and where we can exclude things that threaten us. And yet Uranus would shake all of this up and prompt Corbyn to break free of things which limit him. These limits may well even be psychological, but Uranus will generate that necessary friction and tension for us to break free of limitations. This can often manifest as a sudden, upsetting stroke exciting event, and indeed Uranus's exact aspect with Saturn was in July, the time when Zarah made her unexpected announcement. Now, this Pluto and Uranus are going to bring some powerful changes through for Corbyn, because Uranus will of course move on trine with his Jupiter and also to conjunct his Sun. Pluto too is going to inch forward and begin forming aspects with the Sun Chiron pattern too. So Jeremy's Sun, Chiron, Saturn, Jupiter, which all aspect each other, are now in the process of receiving the beginning tickles from Uranus and from Pluto, and these will be ongoing, bringing very deep, liberating and powerful transformations over the next few years. Neptune too will be ushering in gentle opportunities, some powerful, potentially spiritual healing of old wounds. Do I see patches of immense difficulty? Of course, we all have problems from time to time, but sometimes we can have years where it feels like everything comes at once and is condensed over a 1 or 2 year period. But I don't see that this is coming for Corbyn before 2029. In fact, provided his basic state of health is okay, I think he will make great progress. I raise the issue of health because sometimes with Uranus-Sun transits, and also the fact that Chiron will be pulled into this too, it can bring health issues to the surface, including issues with the heart. And so provided Corbyn is in reasonable shape, he should be okay. The ruler of his 6th house of health may be Mars, and his own progressed Mars is inching very closely now to come up square to his Neptune. And so there could be this need to be careful around health, to be very careful in decision making and to act with common sense. And also because his progressed Sun will move closer to square his natal Mars in a couple of years' time. This too can have implications for health sometimes. This could be something that becomes exact when surgery is needed, but there's also that small danger of physical accidents or mishaps. And again, there will be that need for caution and for care. If Corbyn is as good as his word, this new party is founded and is perceived as a serious threat politically, then it may even be that Corbyn's safety needs guarding and protecting, because some of his ideas will not coincide with the best interests of big business and the very wealthy. So sensible precautions would be in order, of course. Incidentally, Saturn will make some contact with his chart as it moves through the sign of Aries, but I doubt they'll be of the magnitude to upset the apple cart in any way. By 2029, of course, Saturn will be in Taurus, and it will have reached the area of his Moon-Mars conjunction by July of 2029. So we'll have to see what election date emerges over the next few years before we take a closer look at that. Now, how will Zarah's chart be impacted? Because, of course, she is an entirely different kettle of fish. We have so much fixity here. And of course we know that transiting Uranus has been moving through the sign of Taurus for some 7 years now. This has considerably shaken up so many of her natal placements, and it has certainly aroused that strong square between Mercury, Mars, Pluto and her Saturn. This is a very uncompromising chart, and so Zarah has left a trail behind her of relationships or alliances where she has felt they do not align with her own value system. Uranus does require us to be true to ourselves, and so this ongoing process of disruption has meant that Zarah has crossed swords with Labour leadership, and she has of course separated herself from those ties which don't truly align with her inner self. Now, transiting Pluto moving through Aquarius will at some point begin to square her Sun. If she was born very early in the day, she may sense impending niggles around 2027, but I think it's more likely to be 2028. So very broadly speaking, we could see power struggles here of forced change. Sometimes this can be crisis, and they are likely to play out in the workplace or the profession. And similar to Jeremy Corbyn, transiting Saturn will likely make a contact with this part of her chart by July, August of 2029. So this is one we'll have to watch carefully if indeed the election doesn't take place until the very latest time possible. The position of her progressed planets are interesting. They're the green glyphs around the outside of the chart. And what we can see is that her progressed Mercury is currently bearing down on her Mars and Pluto, and will indeed also square that Saturn. So we could envisage a great expenditure of mental effort now. Mercury will be fired up with all that Mars energy, and yet at the same time there may be obstacles in the way, obstacles which require immense application, concentration, communication in order to overcome these, and this is something which will feature quite strongly later this year and next year. Mercury can also be saying something about our style of communication too, and so I would anticipate somebody very persuasive who is able to speak most powerfully. This progression could well help with the mental acuity that you would need to lay the foundation blocks of a whole new party. All this fixed energy will be excellent for the organisation and administration that is needed for this bold new venture. If nothing else, I hope you've grasped how immense and exciting these new developments are. They're a real challenge to the Labour and Conservative parties. I think we are on the precipice of some major changes to our political landscape. I can also see that the Green Party is gaining in power in quite unexpected ways. And of course, the emergence of Reform is going to pose additional threats to Labour and Tory parties alike. I will look closer at Reform in my next video, and we may well also have a quick peek at the Labour and Conservative leadership at present. Until then though, do take good care, and God bless you and your loved ones.